Hello, everyone. Welcome to IGCA's latest webinar. This one is co-hosted with the Association of Professional Compliance Consultants, APCC, and we're discussing something that is very near and dear to our hearts, building a career in compliance. So this should be good for people who are new to compliance, people who are looking to get into compliance, people who are looking to jump on a career change, etc. So before we get started with our 4 panelists and our 8 questions, let me get some admin issues out of the way. This webinar is being recorded. We're going to have a full video recording available within the next 2 weeks. We'll also have a transcript. Also, if you have any questions for our panelists as you're listening to what they're saying, feel free to drop a question on the chat or using the question function on Zoom, and I'll try to incorporate those questions into the discussion. I will be moderating on behalf of IGCA. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each one of you to introduce yourselves. I'll start from the bottom up as I see you on my screen. So Sam, do you want to please get started?
Sure. Hi, my name is Sam Sheen. I'm originally from Canada. I have worked and lived in at least 4 different jurisdictions, both as a solicitor and a compliance professional. In my career, I was previously head of an AML division for a regulator, and I have worked in a variety of group functions. I currently split my time between advising the European Council and various regulators on their AML compliance regulation activities and advising innovative businesses on operationalizing their compliance activities.
Thank you, Sam. Bev?
Hi, yes, my name is Bev Robertson. I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer at the APCC. Previous to that, or alongside that, I was a sole trading independent compliance consultant for the last 18 years in general insurance in the UK. And previous to that, I have spent my whole life in insurance in some shape or form, having started very long time ago as a very lonely compliance person in an accounts department. So that's where I very first started.
Thank you, Bev. Julie?
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Julie Ampadu. I'm the new chair of the APCC, work closely with Bev. I'm also, alongside that, I'm a practicing compliance consultant and regulatory compliance trainer. Prior to having my own business, I'd worked in compliance for about 20 years, moving through roles to role until I took the decision to set up within my own business.
Thank you, Julie. Last but not least, David.
Thanks. Hi, David Symes. I now run compliance recruitment solutions across, well, UK, Europe, and internationally. I originally went into compliance as a young accountant, literally the week that regulation first came into force in the UK, which is almost 34 years ago. I became deputy head of compliance for a FTSE 100 group, which is now part of IGCA, then went into recruitment. So I guess I've been recruiting for and advising on compliance careers for 34 years. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. So now that we've got the introductions out of the way, let's jump into our 8 questions, which kind of cover everything that most of you will want to know about compliance these days and how to get your career started in this very fascinating industry. So the first question, it's a 2-part question, and 2 of you are going to respond to one part, 2 of you are going to respond to the other one. But this is for Bev and David. Based on your experience, is there a specific educational background that is required or preferred when it comes to developing a career in compliance? Bev, do you want to get us started with that one?
Yeah, for sure. So I have a very short answer to this one, and my answer, I feel, is no. I don't think there's any specific background or parameters from an educational perspective that people need to have come from. I think it is definitely a career you can go into more or less at any stage and then build out from there. That's my personal feeling about this. David may well disagree.
David?
Yeah, I have a longer answer. There's definitely a split here. If you look at, as we say in the UK, the City of London, which is mainly sell-side investment banks, stockbrokers, or buy-side fund managers, they normally expect a degree. They'll even look to take graduates on as trainees, and American firms will always insist on it because to them it is a graduate profession at any type of role in financial services. Having said that, if you look at the retail sectors, life and pensions, most types of insurance, It's more about the experience. So they don't insist on being a graduate. And if you have got some previous work experience in operations, admin, sales, then that counts equally valid. The only problem is that you then move up the company or you try and transfer company and you haven't got a degree, and that becomes an issue. But for instance, one way around that is to do a master's level qualification in financial regulation. Then no one in HR or board level can say you're not a graduate when you have a master's. So that would be my answer to that one.
Thank you, David. Julia, Samantha, Sam, do you want to chip in anything or any other kind of opinion here?
I would say in some respects these days, you need to be a little bit of a hybrid experience-wise, which is to say an accountancy degree can be super valuable, as can a law degree, but also degrees which require sort of nonlinear thinking, mathematics, analysis. If you're inquisitive, if you have any investigation background, if you've been to tech college and you've got particular skills around even things around IT, super helpful these days. I think the main thing I would say is sometimes it's less about the qualifications you have, and they are often asked for. But I tended to find the failure was when I was interviewing candidates is they'd have all this great paper qualifications, but they couldn't explain to me about what skills that meant they were bringing and how I could benefit from them.
Thank you, Sam. Julie, anything else to add?
Yeah, from my experience, you know, all of us work with many firms and have worked with many firms across our kind of lifetime in financial services. But clearly there are different sectors. So within the sector that I've worked in the most, the retail sector, I agree with David. It's about your skill set. It's about the qualities that you bring to the role. And if you have the right personal qualities, the right personal characteristics, you can learn the knowledge. It's not difficult. So you can do the learning on the job. You don't have to have you don't have to be a graduate. You don't have to have studied at a higher level once you've left school. If you start with the right company, they will develop you. But you have to have the right character in the first instance. That's my experience.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie. We will get to the character issue in one of the questions that is coming along. But for the second part of this first question is, you know, what are the common assumptions that people make when they think about what it is like to work in compliance? I know this question was posed by Sam, so I'm going to give you, Sam, the first shot at it.
Right. So my area of expertise in compliance is financial crime prevention. And I think the biggest assumption people make is you're going to do all the sexy stuff as soon as you walk in, right? So you're going to be right in there investigating money laundering, terrorist financing. And in actual fact, you may in a small place start off like that, or you may start off reviewing lots of transactional data, or you may be asked to review policies and procedures. And I think it's, in some ways, assumptions people make about it is it can be super exciting and they don't realize sometimes you have to put the hard yards in. But conversely, depending on the kind of business you're in, it can be really interesting. Whereas a lot of people get turned off thinking in our area, oh, I'm never going to get to see some interesting stuff. So in some ways, it depends on the firm you go to. But it's really important to ask the right questions because sometimes people make very broad assumptions. They arrive at the job on the day and they're terribly disappointed.
Yeah, thank you. That's definitely true, Sam. I guess for any job, really.
Yeah.
That applies to, you know, not only compliance, but, you know, probably every single profession out there. Julie, do you want to add anything to what Sam said?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything you've just said there, Sam. In terms of my view on this, the common assumptions that people make about compliance is that it's a tick box exercise. You're doing lots of checking, lots of templates and forms to say that you've done something right or you've done something wrong. And in my view, that couldn't be further from the truth. So the real essence around being in compliance and working in compliance is about people. You're working with people and you're influencing people. So it's not really, yes, the paperwork's part of the role, but that's a very, very dinosaur-like old-fashioned way of looking at what compliance used to be many, many years ago. It obviously involves, as Sam said, lots of analytics and interrogation and investigations. And you can make that as interesting as you like, depending on your particular passion. But actually, it's about people and working with people. So that's my personal view.
Excellent point. David and Bev, either of you want to chip in?
I mean, I would only reiterate Julie's point there. I absolutely agree that certainly in the sector that I'm in, the retail general insurance sector, people don't actually think it's terribly sexy. They think they might be better to become a lawyer or, you know, something far more grandiose, and compliance is a little bit further down the order of career choice. So we are, as an association, working really, really hard to get that message across, that it can be a super interesting career choice. But I think the key for me, compliance is just one element of this job role. And I think to be able to have that relationship with clients and to be able to go in there and talk to them on an easy to understand level and not make it this tick box exercise of just churning out papers from the regulator is a real key skill that people need to have.
Excellent, thank you, Bev. So now we're discussing character and skill, and this next question kind of covers that. And basically the question is, what sort of personality traits and skills are necessary to succeed in the field of compliance? David, you want to get us started with that one?
Yes, indeed. Very good question. First point, there's a couple of points really. First point is to be diplomatic, but still resilient and tenacious. Your employer is a compliance officer to protect clients and customers, but also to protect the firm from reputational damage, fines, and at the end of the day being closed down. So when you come up with a point, you need to get that across. You need to get it across firmly, but where you can diplomatically. If you're stopping someone who had a new product idea, that can affect how they view you for the future. It can affect their own feelings about work. It can affect their promotions. When you're stopping a salesman or a trader from doing a trade, that can directly affect his immediate commission or bonus. But ultimately, you've got to do your job. But if you do it in a nice way, if you tell someone, I'm really sorry, but at the end of the day, you know, that's not going to happen. Or if they've made an error when they're the operations manager, you explain it nicely, you try and mitigate how you put it in any written report. They'll have more respect for you in the future, and you'll do your job better. The second point is commercial. It's to recognise that ultimately the firm needs to make a profit. The worst type of compliance officer I used to work for, I'm afraid, stops every new initiative on the grounds it may cross the line, it may be against the rules, therefore you shouldn't do it. But if it's expanding into a new country, if it's developing a new product, the best compliance officer understands the commercial viewpoint, looks at ways that he or she can put protection around the idea to stop it crossing the line, rather than just say, no, can't happen, and move on. So the more you understand the business and the better you understand the need for the business to still make a profit, the better you'll do your job, the more you'll be respected. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Julie, your take on this?
Yeah, so my take is that, yes, you can teach knowledge and skills. You can't teach somebody's behaviour. So their character and the integrity of the character is absolutely crucial, first of all. Secondly, you need to have or have in your plan a way and a means of developing your interpersonal skills. You are probably the firm's biggest external influencer, aside from their legal advisor and their accountant. So we need to be in a position where we can comfortably and with kudos, with confidence, be able to influence boards of firms, senior managers, senior individuals within those firms. We are essentially our client's critical friend. We have their back. We are trying to protect them and keep them safe, if you like, from enforcement action. But not only that, we're trying to help them to create excellence in their firms. So essentially, we're like the Jiminy Cricket on their shoulder. We are almost like an informal non-executive role, really. We're the ones who go in and challenge the board and who go in and ask them questions that nobody else will dare to ask them. So we have to be able to do that, as David said, in a way that they're going to find acceptable and believable. Because if we create challenge that they're going to listen to, then they're really going to think about why we're asking the question as well, and essentially why it's important that they think about the things we're challenging them with. So yeah, if you're going to do anything now, it would be to develop your interpersonal skills. We have within the training and competence area of compliance, within financial services, we have brilliant training and development in terms of knowledge, whether that's product knowledge or technical knowledge, regulatory knowledge, whatever it is. But we are extremely poor in skills, in our interpersonal skills, our leadership skills, our management skills, our negotiation skills with clients, our report writing, presentation skills. We're incredibly poor. So if you're going to focus on any particular area now, then, and there are all sorts of ways you can develop these areas, then that will be something I think is absolutely crucial for building a career in compliance.
Thank you, Julie. Bev or Sam, anything to add to what has been said?
No, I mean, I would just sort of reiterate, I think one of the key skills a person can have is to think, you know, at some point you work for the regulator, you basically have to be the regulator for the firm, for your client. And I think it's very important to be able to have that skill that cuts across both. As David says, you know, you are that firm's ears and eyes. But for me, the biggest thing I would say as a younger person in compliance is to absolutely make sure that you're self-developing all the time. You can do this, you know, managing conflicts, managing difficult people, being quite thick-skinned, because, you know, as the person with the shield at all times, you are fighting fire from both sides. So it's to have that ability to cope with that pressure as and when it arises.
So
Thank you, Beth. Sam?
I would say, I look at things, I think everything that's said is grand. So I'm also going to look at it from innovative compliance functions. So for financial crime, there's a lot of movement right now in the crypto industry and a lot of fintechs. And I would say there's three things that really matter. One's adaptability, one's responsibility, and the other one is candor. You will not have a set routine if you go into an innovative business as a compliance person, and you will have to be ready for big radical changes that happen. So things you build, things you design may have to be scrapped and started again or go in a different direction. And you cannot be precious about these things. Equally, your boss probably has time for an elevator pitch description of something. Do not rate them a 20-page report. You have to be really intuitive to know what's acceptable. Second is responsibility. The comments and the options that you offer can make a massive difference to how a business operates. And so you have to remember, people will rely on exactly what you've said and they will go and act on it. So you must be absolutely sure that your interpretation of requirements is correct. And you take the time and you check it. And that's almost an integrity thing. And that leads to my third thing, which is candor. I've seen too many people in this profession with a chip on their shoulder who think you are RoboCop when you are even at the medium level of the compliance function. If you go into an innovative business, you will be eaten for lunch if you take that attitude in. Your job is to be able to stand up, be tough, put your big girl pants on when it's time for a debate, but you must be honest. Do not exaggerate. If you don't know, say you're going to find out, but just having the title as compliance officer doesn't mean you get respect off the bat.
Excellent points, Sam. Thank you for that. Thank you, everyone. Let's switch gears now a little bit. We're doing well with time, so that's good. I think we'll be able to cover all 8 questions. We'll switch gears now and look at compliance, about working in compliance in another country, in a different country, moving internationally to work with compliance. This question is mainly for Sam and David. What if I want to work in compliance in another country? What should I be thinking about when developing my compliance career to make this possible? David, you want to get us started with that one?
Yes, indeed. This is mainly focused to people in the UK looking to expand. I'll leave AML to Sam. AML is obviously very transferable. Compliance is less so, but certain angles of compliance are, for instance, on the buy side, fund management, both the products and regulation, they're very similar between the UK, between Dublin and between Luxembourg. Most Luxembourg offices will work in English, so they still prefer you to speak French if you can, just because it makes life easier when you live there. But say if you understand UCITS, you understand fund management, you can move between Ireland, Luxembourg, Britain, no problem at all. Otherwise, the rules tend to be different, but I'll come on to the Middle East in a moment. But in generic terms, one way if you want to expand a career outside of your immediate country is to for instance, the American banks may have an international monitoring team. The British banks will have an international compliance monitoring team. Volunteer to be on that. In the days of Zoom, it's a bit different, but when life goes back to normal, you're visiting the countries, you're getting to know the staff there, you're getting to know their products, you're getting to know their regulations and their culture, of course. Even just working on overseas advisory projects can help. Or finally, getting a secondment, so that to start in Dubai, for example, when banks first started opening in Dubai nearly 20 years ago, on the offshore regimes there, sometimes they, instead of recruiting somebody new locally, they would send one of their own people out there, because although the regulations were slightly different, the culture was very different, they'd rather send a known person into a different country, different time zone, who'd be on the ground, but they knew him or her, and they could trust and rely on that person, and then backfill that person's role in London, for example, rather than recruit somebody completely new to the company in the new location. So I believe there are some people from the Middle East on this call. So just a word on particularly the Gulf, which I call the UAE, which is Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and Qatar. I watched these regulators when they were being set up, originally in Dubai 20 years ago, then Qatar 3 to 4 years later. And it was the former head of the UK IMRO regulator, which was the fund management regulator before the three regulators were merged 20 years ago. He went out to Dubai and later Qatar and set up their conduct of business rules strictly along British COBS, UK FSA, now UK FCA COBS. So it is not impossible for Brits to go out to the Middle East and start straight into a middle management role out there, because the regulations are similar. 20 years ago, it was a lot easier because no one had the local experience. Now it's harder because a lot of people on the ground, not necessarily British expats, but have got that experience. So they don't necessarily need to look to Britain, in particular Australia, New Zealand, to bring people in as they used to. But it is still possible. I've had a recent requirement in Dubai looking for someone at a senior level up to speed with British regulations. They were willing to bring them up to speed with anything local that needed to be. So they're happy during the questions to take anything else on that. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, David. What has your experience been, Sam? Given that you've worked internationally and you are working internationally now.
I am. I know. This is country number 5. First, I would say is do your research. It is not as easy as you think to move countries. Sometimes your qualifications aren't recognized, whereas in other jurisdictions, you can easily slip in and they're worth their weight in gold. So do your research first in terms of the country that you're interested in working in. See if you need to take specific exams or certifications or qualifications. You might need to do top-ups. And that's my next point, which is be ready to invest the time and money. I'm sure David would agree with me. Gone are the days when you used to get lovely packages and your entire relocation would be paid for, cost of living adjustment, and boy, what a sweet deal that was. And there aren't a lot of those anymore. It may be the case that you're going to have to invest in relocating there yourself, maybe doing several flights or trips when you're allowed to do that again, to go and see where you'd live, see what the industry is like, have some coffee with people before you really launch yourself into that search. Join an association that's active in the region or the country. Start to get to know what sort of things they talk about, what things that matter in the compliance community, and really do your research to find out, have there been recent laws passed that are relevant to the area? So European AML regulations are not the same as American, for example, and they're not the same as Canada. So it's really important you don't walk in and presume that everything's the same. My last 2 things are network. Most of the jobs that I have received started off with networking with people in other countries, people I kept in contact with after I moved to different countries. Your network is really valuable, cultivate it. And last but not least, have your pitch ready. When you're moving to a jurisdiction which isn't familiar with you or your career, it's really important you don't force them to hunt through your CV to understand if you match with them or not. And that's why cover letters are really key. If you're going to work internationally, is to be able to explain what was relevant about your experience that, despite not having a local qualification, makes you the perfect candidate for the job. So really kind of trying to line it up rather than say to them, here, you figure out how I can be valuable to you.
Thank you, Sam. From the perspective of APCC, Bev or Julie, anything to add?
Don't think from me.
No, not so much. We are primarily focused in the UK purely. So yeah.
Sounds good. So let's move on now to actual questions on the APCC. These are for Julie and for Bev. Basically, the question we have here is, what is the role of an organization such as APCC in promoting compliance as a viable profession for recent graduates? Bev, you want to tackle that one?
Yes. So I think between Julie and myself, we could talk about this for several hours. So the APCC, it's such a broad church in terms of compliance consultants who are our members. We reach basically every sector of the UK financial services. But education is something that we are very, very much focused on, certainly in 2022. And Julie herself, who she can talk about, she's currently chairing our newly formed education working group. Now, this is not purely aimed at graduates, this is across the board. Hence why at the very beginning, when you were asking about qualifications, my answer was no, because we are at the moment doing things like speakers for schools, where we're trying to get people who are leaving school to come into compliance as a career. We are also trying to encourage apprenticeships in this T levels, which are the new education's settings for people to come into compliance. So there are lots of different avenues at the moment, as well as obviously leaving and going into a graduate program. So I think to say that it's high on the APCC's agenda is an understatement, but it's very much work in progress. So it's for us, we are aware, certainly having been asked by the regulator to help them address the shortfall in younger people coming into compliance. It's not that great sexy industry in the UK. Certainly in London, there are so many other career choices. So we have a tough brief to fill, but we are definitely working on that. But for me, having been in the industry for 20 years, I think it's been a fantastic career choice, and one that I think anybody coming out of university should really, really focus on.
Julie?
Yeah, thanks. I again agree with everything that Bev said there. So yeah, our educational working group has previously been running for about 3 years as what we called an apprenticeship working group. So we're working really hard with various institutions to try to create a formal career path into compliance. The UK universities now, alongside all of their academic routes to qualifications, their degree qualifications, for example, they have to now offer the equivalent of that in an apprenticeship. And what an apprenticeship means is that you can hit the ground running, not just with all the knowledge, but with the skills that you need as well. So you're a fully formed compliance expert by the time you leave that apprenticeship and ready to set to work within a firm. We are still working on that, and we've have real difficulty, but we are pressing forward. We're seeing some chinks in the armour now to focus on this path. But I think if you were to ask 100 compliance consultants whether they chose compliance as a career, and they elected to choose that career from school, 99% of them would probably have said no. And the reason for that is, and certainly for myself, I fell into compliance. I'd never even heard of compliance before I ever entered financial services. And we've done work in schools, and I personally have worked with schools and higher education institutions to go and spread the word and tell people about compliance. We have schools where careers officers haven't heard about compliance. So how on earth are they going to point young people or people who are later in life looking for a career change? How is anybody going to find out about compliance as a career? And it's an extremely rewarding career. The scope of it is absolutely vast. No matter what kind of interest you have, you will find something in compliance that fits your bag, that really relates to you, and you can become really passionate about. So we are very much in the frame of mind that we now have a workforce of over 50% in the UK, which are millennials and Generation Z. which a number of you might fall into that cohort. And actually, you need to be furnished with the right information to help you to get that leg up, to get the step up, to get into this career. So we're also looking at a new initiative as part of the educational working group, aren't we, Bev, with Steve McGuinness, who's one of our other directors, to look at, to have a bit more of a social purpose around this as well. So we're not just looking at who's interested and getting people interested who would normally be interested. We're looking at people who are not in such a social environment that they might ever think of choosing compliance. These might end up otherwise of being blue collar workers, for example, and don't see that they have a potentially rewarding future ahead of them. So we're also looking to how to reach those people as well. So our purpose as the APCC is spread into the social fabric of our country.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Julie, for that. Now we have a question that is somewhat related. Once you actually start your career in compliance, how important is it to actually continue that education and that development? So the question is, how important is continuing professional development, CPD, in a professional's role in the compliance sector? Again, this is for Julie and Bev. Then I'll let David and Sam, chip in if they would like. So Bev?
Yeah. So for me, I would say it's extremely important, and one of the key things that as the individual person you can own and take with you. So CPD is not necessarily something that would be required if you became a compliance consultant, but even if your employer didn't require you to have CPD, you're not in a regulated environment. The one thing I used to always say to my clients who had to record CPD was, own it yourself. This is something you can take with you. You can take it to another employer. If you change direction, it still helps and it still forms the backbone. And it's, for me, it's kind of a continuous building of your CV. So you just move it wherever you go. So I felt it was a very, very important area that each person can own themselves.
Mm-hmm. Julie?
Yeah, so a number of us are members of other professional bodies within the financial services space, which do have a CPD requirement anyway. And I think because of our financial services backgrounds that we've all come from, it's as natural as a doctor or a solicitor or anybody, an accountant, anybody else who's in a profession where you need to maintain your integrity, you need to maintain your development. If you were to go and you had the choice of a surgeon to undertake your operation, would you choose one who had the best original qualification and they'd left it there? Or would you choose the one who takes time every week to just keep their knowledge topped up, the latest techniques, the latest developments in medicine? You would clearly choose that one. And also it helps you as a consultant to find your path. As I said, there are so many different routes to go down, depending on the firm you join, depending on the opportunities you come across and you seek out as well. Don't wait for firms to come to you. Your CPD will help you to shape your own future in terms of which direction. It might be AML. It might be, you might end up being on a board of directors of an authorised firm. You might end up being a non-exec. You might end up working within a larger firm. You might end up setting up your own business. So there are all sorts of different routes within a whole range of different sectors across financial services. So I think it's impossible to imagine, for me, doing my job without CPD. I'm doing CPD every day. Every time I'm doing a piece of work, Sam, you'll agree, David, you'll agree, I'm sure. Every piece of work you're doing for a client, you're doing some kind of CPD, and you can't not. So it becomes just natural part of your working, everyday working fabric.
Thank you, Julie. Sam, David, anything else to add on your experience with CPDs? With CPD, I guess?
I feel CPD'd all over as a solicitor and then as a compliance person, but in all seriousness, you cannot do this job credibly unless you are up to date. And reading tweets doesn't really cut it. The fact of the matter is that in this profession in particular, people are very skeptical about compliance, particularly in the innovative businesses, where they'll say, are you really sure that's a risk? Are you really sure that's a requirement? And it's like having an interview every time you go into a serious meeting and being able to say, well, actually last week this happened and there was an interesting case which is similar to our business and here's how the regulator answered. or to be able to say, well, actually, there's a consultation on in about 6 months. This is going to be rolled out and it may affect our business or our onboarding or the type of clients we can take. It increases your credibility, but it makes you invaluable to your compliance team because you are proactively looking ahead, you're horizon gazing, you're anticipating what are going to be operational challenges for the business. I also think it stops you being stale. It's really easy to get myopic in compliance, become a specialist of just one particular area. And the reality is compliance evolves all the time. So, you know, I like the brain twister challenge of what I do, but you've really got to love the topic to really put the time and effort in for that CPD if you're going to get value from it.
Thank you, Sam. David, anything to add there?
Further to add, I think everyone else has said the right thing. So
excellent, thank you. Let's shift gears now and move away maybe from what we have been discussing, and let's look at some of kind of the current trends or topics in compliance. Of course, we couldn't have a webinar without discussing, the big elephant in the room, which is COVID-19. So let's touch upon that very quickly. So the question here is, how has the compliance function changed because of COVID-19? How will this impact the decision of a young professional to specialize in compliance, if there will be any such impact? David, you want to get us started there?
Yeah, a couple of things really. I think everyone else would agree that when you're working in compliance and you want to influence people, which is your job, it's what you're getting paid to do, it's a lot easier grabbing someone for a coffee, potentially before or after the meeting, than having to set up a Zoom, try and influence people in public. So I think actually doing your job gets a lot harder. I'm an accountant by training. I have no idea how you can do auditing and monitoring remotely that easily, but apparently you can. Final thing I'd say is just particularly for people coming into the profession, you learn on the job by sitting next to someone. Yes, you sit in a meeting and you learn what's going on and you're here, where you've been tasked with doing a certain bit of research that you then present, but then you've done that, you're not learning from there. You learn by osmosis. You sit there, you're not formally part of the meeting, but you happen to overhear your colleague on a phone. Wow, that's amazing. Can you tell me how that happened? When it comes to the monitoring or auditing, even more so, you can't learn that over a Zoom or by emails. You go out there with your manager and he or she says, right, this is how we do it. You do that bit. Any issues, just tap me on the shoulder, ask me how and why we need to change this. You learn by osmosis, by picking up as it comes to you, not by structured learning. That's how I look at it for, as an auditor and compliance monitoring person in particular. So I think the sooner compliance officers can work together most of the time, the better for everyone.
That makes perfect sense. Sam?
Wow, it's been a really tough 2 years. I can't believe it's been 2 years. I think what I would say is go back to all of our collective comments at the beginning about that skill of resilience. And what I mean by that is employers were phenomenally flexible in the first year in terms of working. I mean, I certainly know for some of my clients, they allowed people to split their day so they could work in the morning, take care of the kids during homeschooling, and then they would continue their work in the evening. Some places were allowing people to sort of start midday and work into the evening. I mean, there was very much a sense of people's mental health and well-being was really important, as was, their family commitments. So fast forward, here we are, the world is changing again, and you're starting to see rumblings again of, gee, we really need to get people back together. And that's going to feel really foreign for a lot of people. It's going to feel really odd. And so I think it's really important, particularly for compliance folks who have figured out how to do their jobs really well remotely, is figure out how those discussions with your employer. It shouldn't be presumed because you haven't gone in for 2 years that you shouldn't go in, but you should be able to talk through what your concerns are. I've heard some people say perfectly legitimate concerns like, I get so much more done at home because the office is so loud. Everybody's so happy to be there, but I can't hear myself think. Where we have other people who've simply said, I've set up my lifestyle now so I can take those breaks during the day. And well, your employer may not be able to accommodate that anymore. And then there's the reverse side, which is those of you that are going to stay remote, to be able to work your way up the compliance ladder of career, you're going to have to work extra hard to do that networking inside your organization and outside your organization. So even if it is by Zoom, even if it's calling up folks and saying, I just want to introduce myself and have a chat with you for 15 minutes, don't feel shy. Keep that stuff going on, because it really is valuable as you work on your career to just keep in touch with people, let them know you're still interested, and that you're still around. It's really easy to fall down that foxhole and not be seen for a very long time. So yeah, there's two very different sides of it, Matteo, that I think are going to be very different experiences for people, but really building up that resiliency for what's going to come next and how we need to adapt, I think is going to be really important.
That makes perfect sense. And I'm a huge proponent of the hybrid model, if it's possible. I mean, a combination of the two is ideal, and that's something that I've been going through for the past 2 years. Just if you can go to the office twice a week and spend the other 3 days in the sanctity of your home with peace and quiet, and your pajamas, that's great. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how this evolves. Julie, Bev, what are your take on this?
I would add a positive that I can see from COVID, if that can be said in the same sentence, is that I do think for how we work, it has fast forwarded the use of tech. And I think that hopefully will continue to have the advantages that it's brought. So the likes of doing this today, if you had have decided to run this in London as a face-to-face event, it would have just been so much more time consuming for everybody. So for me to be able to do this kind of thing is fantastic. And I do hope that this continues. I think the negative, certainly for younger people in compliance, the compliance function will always be the same. Compliance is compliance. It is what the regulator brings out. Yes, COVID did bring a lot more regulation with it very quickly. It was very mad, it was manic. But I think for me, the key thing is for, if you're coming out of a graduate program, is to get back into the office, to be with people. Nobody in their teens or their 20s wants to be working from their bedroom all day, every day. It's not healthy. And compliance can be quite a dry subject. So, we need to punch as much fun into it as we can. And I think that can only be done by being face to face with people, having those, drinks after work, that kind of thing. So I think that's really important that we get back to some kind of a hybrid model along those lines.
Thank you, Bev. Julie, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of work on this at the moment. I've been studying for the last 2 or 3, 4 years, actually, extensively culture. And about 6 years ago now, I think, I spoke at the Shard about this in London, because about this whole new generational divide between work as a Generation X, if you like, baby boomer, and the Generation Z and millennials, and how financial services might hit a wall if things didn't change in terms of working practices and thinking and looking forward to what younger people wanted. And so came along COVID around that time as well. So, and things have changed. And I think that what has changed for us as compliance consultants, for me personally, I have had to have a huge amount more interaction with my clients on talking about things that are not to do with compliance. So our role evolved a long time ago, not just as a compliance consultant, but as a kind of business advisor, a business support function. But the firms themselves, since COVID, have, when they've had remote staff, then they've had to really focus on the long term about really good, really regular communication, not checking in and having cameras on people's laptops and supervising them that way, but just checking in and saying, just thought I'd give you a quick call. How are you doing? Are you okay? Not in a formal half-hour meeting, where everybody's got to be dressed and look good on top. But this whole dynamic and the whole culture of compliance has shifted somewhat based on what the firms had to experience. And of course, this is going to continue with the hybrid model. So in terms of what shifted, I think there's been a lot more pastoral care that's been needed of our clients and the line managers and senior managers of those client firms with their staff. So as an employee or as a potential employee working in compliance, we also know there's been the Great Resignation, where a lot of people now, not just the younger generation, but my older generation as well, are getting up in droves and voting with their feet and saying, yeah, okay, so this was the only way we worked before, but actually we don't want to do that anymore. So the whole work-life balance is, as everybody knows, has come into question. So if you are looking at your current position, am I in the right firm? Do I want to move on? Well, is there something, if you like the firm, you enjoy working with the people you're with, you feel that you can add value to the firm, then think about what kind of conversations you can have with the people in your firm, your line manager, your senior team. What kind of influence can you provide to help them to move in the right direction, so that you'll want to stay? And if not, and you are thinking about moving into some other role with some other firm potentially, again, really do your research. Make sure you're looking for the right kind of firm, a firm that really invests in your development. And again, I think that firms are starting, and the reason I'm saying this is that because firms are starting to realize since COVID that the traditional model, the traditional way of doing things just isn't going to cut it for anybody anymore. And everybody needs the right job. So, and the right career in the right firm. So be brutal and challenge the firm if you go for interviews, ask the right questions in the right way, obviously. Don't threaten anybody at your interview, but be inquisitive, and don't be afraid to ask about their social purpose, about their view on ESG and personal development. Don't be frightened of them thinking you're going to be a little bit too cocky. This is your future, so you need to be looking for the right kind of firm. So as a consultant, and as a potential employee within consultancy, I think things have really changed, taken a real shift on the back of COVID.
Thank you, Julie. We have I'm gonna throw this question out there because it was an interesting question from one of the listeners. It should be fairly easy to answer. But basically, on the topic of CPD, are there any known magazine subscriptions you are subscribed to currently that have helped you with your job? Any magazines that you want to recommend for compliance professionals or budding compliance professionals? Anything that has helped your job?
For me, there's not one specific magazine. It's the industry press. In the UK, we have a whole range of industry press, financial services, the Financial Conduct Authority, the regulators, updates you can subscribe to. There's loads coming out. You can subscribe to those on a regular basis, where you'll get email updates on all kinds of regulatory areas. All financial press. I think LinkedIn for me is very valuable, because not only can you access new information, you can not just see new information about regulation, but how it's being accepted within that sector of the industry. You can see people's views on what's going to work, what isn't. So you're also getting a sense of emotion and direction in terms of how firms are coping, and compliance consultants as well, legal opinion. There are lots of different angles you can see through sites like LinkedIn, and there are all sorts of groups on LinkedIn for networking, contributing, commenting, discussing, asking questions, and I think we're quite a close-knit group in that respect. Sam, I don't know you obviously, but do you agree with that? I think that we like to help each other, so get involved and learn that way. Just see where that takes you.
I just think there's an ocean of content out there. I mean, truly, you're spoiled for choice. I think what I'd suggest to you is just invest the time, set aside a couple of hours every week, and read what is out there. Some LinkedIn groups will attach links to really good periodicals. Sometimes you'll find great, credible websites that have really good information, but I think it's finding a really good source that you connect well with and you understand how things are written. I like reading legal cases. I like reading them raw, exactly as they are coming out of the courts. Not everybody likes that. Some of them prefer government websites with the summaries on them. So figure out how you learn best, what you ingest best, and start creating your own library.
David, anything to add there? Excellent. We have 10 minutes. Very quickly, 2 questions. One which Bev already touched upon a little bit, but how has technology impacted the compliance function? Has it made life easier for professionals in the sector, or will compliance one day be something that is fully automated? What is your take on technology and compliance? Sam, you want to get us started there?
Has it impacted? The answer to that is yes, and it has for several years now. It has since the early noughties when we were using transaction monitoring tools around financial crime. How is it relevant for people starting their career or thinking about going in? You need to get tech savvy. It means you need to understand basic functionality of tools. You need to understand what the term data means, how information looks when it's ingested in systems for compliance people to interpret. It has made life incredibly easy if you can harness and upskill yourself with those know-how essentials to use it. Otherwise, if you thought, I'll leave that to somebody else, you've probably fallen way behind. And I think it's less about automating the compliance function and a lot more about saving the time in gathering raw data and allowing for the focus to be better on analysis of, well, what is it that I'm looking at? So I would just say, yeah, it's been great, but you have to be ready to get some real discomfort, get in there like I did. I took a data analytics course after years of not doing probability. It's probably one of the best investments I ever made. It completely changed the way I look at technology and what compliance should do with it.
Excellent. David, technology, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm interested in your second question. Will technology take over? I think splitting compliance into two halves almost is different aspects, but on compliance rather than AML, you have monitoring. So unlike AML transaction monitoring, this can be desk reviews, topic reviews, and yeah, I think that there may be grounds for thinking that that could be completely automated. The other side of it, advisory, can we launch this new product? Can we do this particular trade? What are the aspects of this corporate finance transaction we need to look at? I think, well, I hope that there's so many nuances involved in this that all the research may be fed through AI, everything that you need to understand, but the ultimate decision will still need to be a human being making a manual override somewhere. A computer will not say, yes, that product can be launched. Yes, that deal, complex deal can happen. There'll still need to be that human judgment at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But subjective viewpoint.
Right. Bev?
Yeah, so that question does kind of make me smile. So even this week in a meeting with the regulator, they actually said, if we get this right and if we can roll this out in the right way, then we won't need compliance consultants or compliance officers. That is never going to happen. And I am very, very confident. I would bet my mortgage on that. The reason for that is because regulation is a rule. It's a tick box, if you want to call it that. Interpreting that rule is a skill, and that will always take relationships. It will always take the person, as Sam touched on earlier, to morph themselves into the firm that they're working for that day. The one thing I always said in compliance is expect the unexpected. So I could walk into one client on a Monday who's got this brand new product, it's a fintech, it's going to be regtech, and you have to react to that. Then the next day you might walk into another consultancy firm who have got a completely different need, different requirements. So for me, I am very, very comfortable that the career of compliance is going to be around for a very, very long time. Definitely. I do think there are places that will be automated, reports, gathering different data, and the regulator is very much focused on that with their big transformation data program. But there will always be a place for consultants and compliance officers without a doubt.
Thank you, Bev. Julie, last but not least.
Yeah, totally agree. Our role is not going anywhere. So in my view, there are certain sectors that use tech a lot more generally day to day than others. So obviously fintech, payment services type firms, for example, crypto, it's all about the data. It's all about gathering the right information that's valuable, that's accurate, so that the compliance consultant can make the right judgments and the firm itself can make the right internal judgments and recommendations to the board for what needs to change or where the risks lie, etc. So the data is needed, and I think what tech is providing, I think Sam's right, is providing the route for us to obtain better quality and quicker, faster, more current data. But we still need to interpret that in the right way. And we can't interpret data in a silo either. And firms that do that, I see them making big mistakes. You have to have somewhere in the firm that looks at compliance and the cause and effect on a holistic level, to a holistic degree across the organisation, and that impacts outside of that specific area that you're gathering the data on. And one of the first things I said today was compliance is all about people. So it is about our ability to influence people, for firms to listen to our recommendations, listen to our advice, and without that, they just have a bunch of data. So that's not going to give them anything really. So I think that we are definitely here to stay for a very long time. Plus the fact that we are actually business advisors as well as compliance advisors now. So our role is actually expanded, if anything.
Excellent, thank you. We have time for one last question. I know Sam has to jump off in a bit, so I'll start off with her. But this is kind of a question to, you know, wrap things up nicely with a nice bow. But what would be your 3 top tips for a young graduate or someone at a crossroads looking to get into compliance? Top 3 tips from each one of you. Sam, get us started, please.
If you want to get into compliance, oh gosh, three tips. Number 1, decide what area of compliance you want to get involved with. 2, put the time in to research what kind of things these jobs involve and be ready to explain why your current skill set can fill those responsibilities. And 3, cultivate a passion for the topic. The best compliance people are the ones that we hire who just show such enthusiasm for the topic, and that's the fit that we're looking for.
Excellent. Thank you, Sam. Bev?
I mean, I would say something very similar in terms of compliance is a very small word for a very, very large industry. So don't be narrow-minded. If you go into something, compliance, you can be a bit like a generalist, and then you go off and you branch off into other areas. And that might not even be compliance. You know, you can go into group risk and you go into ESG, and it really is a huge career choice. The other thing I would say, as Sam has just said, is do your research. Do the sector that is right for you, and because passion, you know, if we all do a job we love, then we aren't doing a job. That would be my key takeaway. And the thing as well is, it's also a bit of an employees market at the moment. So get it right, get the right firm for you, and make sure that it's going to be what you want it to be. There are a lot of different looking firms depending on the sector. So, you know, but at the same time, your choice is not a big final decision. It's not a be all and end all. There are so many different avenues you can move into from where you might start your career at. So as I said right at the very beginning, I started off as an accounts clerk, and then here I am today. So there are many, many different routes to go through the field of compliance.
Excellent. Thank you, Bev. Julie, your 3 tips?
Okay, well, I'd agree. I might not have 3 for you, but first thing
That's
is,
fine.
I would say there are lots and lots of opportunities for compliance in the UK these days, and firms are growing. Compliance and regulation is not going away. The role is a fantastic opportunity. So that's the first thing. There are lots of opportunities. So all you need to do is open your eyes and look for them. And the way you do that is to network, like Sam said. Get networking, get talking to people. Contact us. You know, I can't think of anybody in financial services sector who's working in the sector who wouldn't be happy to give you a hand to hold, just to help you, to give you some guidance, give you some advice. We're all happy to do that, gladly, because some of us didn't have that when we entered the financial services sector. So keep your networking going, cultivate relationships. Volunteer to go in and have a chat with somebody, to spend an hour with them at the firm, look at what different types of firms do. So you've got to invest yourself in this, and you will find that opportunities will come your way.
Thank you, Julie. Last but not least, to wrap it up, David.
Thanks. Yeah, I've got 3 tips, 2 of them for graduates, 1 for people at Crossroads. First of all, if you're a graduate, you haven't yet got any work experience. We're talking here about financial services. Get some work experience in financial services in whatever capacity: admin, operations, sales, even though unlikely for a short-term role. That way you understand the sector, you'll understand some of the products, you'll understand the role of regulation, because you'll be told on the first day all about regulation, and you'll understand, hopefully, how and why the compliance function fits into the whole piece. Secondly, and this is a bit controversial because it depends on your financial position, but if you're at university, if you can get intern experience directly in the compliance function, or if when you graduate, you can afford to take 3 months, and again, networking is crucial for getting the opportunity, that you offer to work for free for 3 months in a compliance function. If you can find that sort of role, after that you're made. Every other graduate's applying, they may have a slightly better degree than you, but you're the one who's actually done 3 months interning or unpaid work experience, and you'll get that job. Finally, looking at people already in financial services but not in compliance, that either are losing their job, unfortunately, or just have a strong interest in compliance, then get within your existing firm, ask for a secondment into compliance, or take a full-time transfer, even if you have to take a salary cut. That firm knows you. They know your strengths, they know your skills, they know your personality. You already know the procedures, the people, the products, the processes. So you are of value to that firm to move in. And that way, if they can move you into compliance, it's going to make you redundant, or if you can get that experience in compliance internally, you're then valuable to another company. Whereas a real life example, I'll get a sales manager, it could be from insurance, it could be from the city. They're on 100,000 a year, they've just been made redundant. They tell me they understand compliance because they've been following compliance policies and procedures all their career, and they're happy to take only an £80,000 a year job to move into compliance. Why the hell would anyone expecting 10 years experience in compliance for the 80,000 or more take someone who hasn't worked in compliance just because they think they can understand it? So before you become that idiot expecting the world to give you a living, ask internally, can someone give me some experience in compliance? Let me show you how I can work, and I'll learn from it. So now, and I think one thing the industry needs to do more is to cross-train people with existing financial service experience, whether it's in compliance or within AML, how to move across, because we're short of new blood, and people in the industry are a very good source of that new blood. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. Sam says goodbye to everyone. She had to pop out because she has another event right now. So basically, you know, this wraps things up for us. I want to, on behalf of IGCA, thank our panelists, David, Julie, Bev, and Sam, for taking the time to, you know, discuss these issues with us. I think it was very, very useful. It's going to be very useful to our younger members and those people who are at a crossroads and want to make that switch to compliance. I'll get some admin issues out of the way and say goodbye. To everyone listening in, we do have a video recording of this session. It should be available within the next week or so. We'll also have a full transcript that we'll make sure to mail to everyone, email to everyone, and share on social media, etc. If you have any questions for our panelists, you can send me an email and I will make sure to forward those to Bev, Julie, David, or Sam, and I'm sure they'd be happy to you know, help out. So with that said, thank you very much once again, and hope we manage to do this again sometime soon. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
Bye.